A lot of people consider themselves to be solo players in Destiny 2, so today I wanted to react to this video from Timbo here about the struggles of being a solo player. Now, this video is about 2 years old at this point, so I'm really interested to see if any of the things he talks about have been changed or improved since this video was released. Like, I do know we have the Fireteam Finder, the in-game LFG, and there have been some other small tweaks that have happened over the last 2 years. So we'll have to see if the stuff he talks about is actually still a problem or if it has been addressed since he made this video. And before we get started, the one other thing I can't help but notice is this top comment right here that says, "This game genuinely is so lonely and hard when you don't have friends to play with that are as patient or committed as you. I've never been able to finish a single raid since Destiny 1, which is really sad." And I think that's probably something we'll have to get into more later, because there are a lot of people who simply have never done a raid. So anyway, let's jump right into it.
Today I want to spend some time talking about the current solo player experience. Destiny 2 is primarily a cooperative game, but a big chunk of people play all by themselves, either by preference or because they don't have friends.
Like I said,
to
about
play with.
75%.
And I think almost all of us have been a
That's
solo.
in my audience, though. Like, I should clarify, the 75% or 74, whatever it was, that was of my audience. Like, if you consider the overall Destiny population, it's probably even higher. Like, if I had to guess, I'd probably say closer to 85 or even 90% of the general population of Destiny are solo players.
Player at one point or another and have felt some level of FOMO. Destiny 2, like most games, has a lot of prerequisites to obtaining gear and weapons, but sometimes grinding to the proper power level isn't enough. Sometimes people get deterred from playing certain content because they don't have others to do it with, and because of that, miss out on the satisfaction of blowing up 100 Thrall with Gjallarhorn. So what's the solo player experience like in Destiny 2? What are the common struggles, and are there ways to improve this going forward? This is a topic I rarely, if ever, hear people talk about, which is crazy because only like 7 to 15% of Destiny players have completed a raid.
Okay, I've just got to stop it right here. I think this is actually a really misleading statistic, because this considers like literally every single person who has ever downloaded the game, and there are plenty of people who download the game, play it for like 5 minutes, and then decide that it's not for them. So I think actually there was a really interesting stat from Luke Smith. Let me try to pull this up real quick. Okay, so here it is. He's talking about how there's always someone to play with in Destiny 2, and he gives a really interesting stat about the percentage of people who reached the max power in D1 who completed a raid. And I think that's a much better stat because it actually talks about the people who are invested enough into the game to actually have a chance of doing a raid. Because if you only play the game for 5 minutes, like obviously you're not going to complete a raid.
This is a big one for us. The raids in Destiny 1 couldn't be experienced by everyone. 50% of people who reached the level cap organized into fire teams and completed a raid. This is amazing. Like, I think this is almost a miracle. Because whether you did it through your friends list or the communities that you formed, or used out-of-game applications to build fire teams and take on these incredible challenges, or, as I know, pull the network cable from Crota.
Yeah, so anyway, he considers this kind of a miraculous stat that 50% of people who reached the level cap in D1 were able to complete a raid. And that kind of makes sense because Destiny 1 had like really limited LFG, like Discord wasn't as much of a thing and back in that time, and there was no in-game LFG, like there was very limited like communication systems within the game. So I can see why he considers that a crazy stat. But yeah, in Destiny 2, that number has definitely gone up. Like there's definitely a higher percentage of people who have completed a raid. But the point still stands that there is a big chunk of solo players who have just never gotten into a raid, never completed a raid, because they don't have the systems to group up with other people, or they just don't want to group up with other people. And thus they miss out on a big part of Destiny's content.
Meaning the vast majority of people play the game alone, sticking to matchmaking where it's safe. I feel like I've got a well-rounded perspective on this because I've been a solo player, I've tried LFG, I've also had 5+ max level friends to play with, so I'm hoping I can represent all sides fairly here. My Destiny timeline goes as this. When Destiny first came out, I played completely by myself, but I was also in that weird in-between group of people because I didn't want to play the game casually. I followed it online, I wanted to do Vault of Glass and Nightfall Strikes and get the thorn from Fogoth, if anyone remembers that original quest. But I didn't have anyone to do that stuff with.
I think that's relatable for a lot of people.
I got recruited from random people in the tower, something I don't think anyone does anymore, and made some friends. I casually hopped around a few different groups before landing on one that I really clicked with, and from the Dark Below forward, I had people to play with that were just as into the game as I was.
Honestly, I think this is actually a very underrated way of meeting people. Like, I made some of my friends in Destiny 1. Like, before I made content, I made a lot of people... I made a lot of friends in Destiny 1 who I just randomly met through the game. Like, I'd play a PvP match against them. I'd message them after, be like, oh, good game. And then, you know, we'd get added to friends list and eventually group up and do something together. And I think some people in Destiny 2 just assume that you can't do this. And it's still very much a thing that you can do. Just meet people in the game and eventually, you know, play together, see if you vibe with them, and maybe you'll become friends and end up doing activities long term. You never know.
I got to do Crota, Vault of Glass, Skolas, Trials of Osiris, King's Fall, Wrath of the Machine, all the activities that require a pre-made fire team. And this is when I loved Destiny the most. Some people from that group stopped playing shortly after Leviathan and Destiny 2, and from that point forward, so did I for the most part. I kept up with the game, but I just hopped in once a year whenever the next big expansion came out. If you go back and look at my videos, you can see this change reflected in my content. When my friends moved away from Destiny, I started making videos on other games. Despite buying and playing every major Destiny 2 content release, I never did Last Wish, I never did the Raid Layers, Scourge of the Past, or Deepstone Crypt. I did do Garden of Salvation once or twice with Evan F, but that was mostly just because I wanted Divinity. So with that being said, you're probably wondering how I have all this raid and dungeon footage, and I will explain that later. I want to start off by going over what content solo players cannot obtain. When Destiny first came out, you needed to complete raids to reach the maximum level. That's no longer a thing, and I think overall the game has become a lot friendlier towards solo players.
Yeah, that was crazy. And back in D1, you had to literally do the raid in order to get max power, but then you also had a hard time in the raid if you weren't max power. So it was kind of this strange system where you would have to gear up as much as you possibly could and then do the raid while under leveled, which was kind of difficult so that you could reach the higher power level. But anyway, let's get back to it.
The only thing in the game you cannot get as a solo player are raid weapons, raid gear, dungeon weapons, dungeon gear.
Well, you technically could get dungeon weapons and dungeon gear just running it solo, but yep.
Adept Nightfall weapons, a few ships, emblems, shaders, flare, essentially, and certain seals like Conqueror. I might have missed something, but I think that's it. I'll throw Hawkmoon and Dead Man's Tale in there too, because those missions are very hard to play solo. Bungie has made solo playlists for Trials of Osiris and Iron Banner. There are plenty of ways to get pinnacle loot drops, and some of the best weapons in the game are simple world drops like Cartesian Coordinate. I will admit,
I think that has become much less of a thing over the years. Like Cartesian Coordinate, okay, sure, but a lot of the best weapons nowadays do not come from world drops. I mean, of course, there are a couple exceptions, but yeah, most of them are from endgame.
the exotic missions and dungeons and raids are some of Destiny 2's best content.
That's true.
Gjallarhorn's freaking awesome. Not gonna pretend it's not. But strictly looking at quantity for a second here, the vast majority of Destiny 2 content is available and obtainable for solo players. I think raids should definitely be in the game, but I also think raids and content like it that requires you to have a full high-level fire team is one of, if not the biggest reason why people stop playing Destiny. For my own...
Really? I would completely disagree with that. I don't think that raids existing cause people to quit playing Destiny. I really don't get that logic, but let's see where he's going with this one.
Literally every single person I've ever talked to that has played Destiny at one point or another, if they've quit, they've all done so for one of two reasons. One, the game became too expensive, or two, they didn't have anyone to play it with.
Okay, that's a much more valid way of putting it. I mean, The game expense thing has been a hot topic for ages now, but luckily it has been improved with this new legacy pack that is added into the game. Hopefully it's not going to be ridiculously expensive, but anyway, not having people to play with is definitely a relatable issue for a lot of people, and I could see why not having people to play with could lead you to quitting the game.
The interesting thing is that Destiny has largely remained the same price for 8 years. Yearly $40 expansion with a more expensive deluxe edition, and seasonal content or DLC that costs around another $30 to $40 per year. Even at its most expensive points, like right now, Destiny 2 is still cheaper than a Netflix or HBO Max subscription, something like that. And considering Bungie has content coming out constantly all year round, I don't think that's too far-fetched of a comparison. So if the game itself...
Yeah, I mean, a lot of games straight up just do have a subscription model, just like Netflix or another streaming service. I mean, look at World of Warcraft or like tons of other MMOs. They're just subscription based where you pay every month rather than buying the expansion once. And also in those games, you do have to also buy the expansion on top of the subscription. So you might actually look at it that way and say that we have it good in Destiny, not having to pay for a subscription in addition to the expansions.
Itself isn't getting any more expensive. Why do people say that? I think people feel as though they're not getting their money's worth out of the game. They pay the same amount as everyone else, but since they can't do the raid or dungeon or whatever, they feel less incentive to grind and continue playing past the campaign, which is honestly where most of the fun and value of Destiny 2 is.
There are actually a lot of people who will play the campaign and then just log off the game for the whole year and then like come back for the next expansion to play that campaign. I will never understand. Like the campaign is just like, 1 or 2 days of content at the most. And there's so much more depth to the Destiny universe than just the campaign. So anyway, I do kind of get this perspective of people who are solo players not feeling like they're getting as much value out of the game because they're not able to access the full depth of the content. But I feel like you can eventually expand your horizons as you grow as a player and as you grow as a guardian, like improve your guardians and your stats and your gear and all that, and eventually get more into this endgame stuff and eventually feel like you're getting the full value out of the expansions.
5 or more people to play with that are grinding alongside you, the incentive to keep playing and keep paying dies out. Now I know what some of you are thinking, what about LFG? We shouldn't feel sorry for these people because technically they can do the raid. They can complete that exotic quest. They're getting in their own way. And you know what? I partially agree with that.
Especially now that we have the in-game LFG, anyone can sign up for these things. It is kind of a choice to be a solo player, which is basically what he's saying. There's nothing in the game that says you have to be a solo player.
But then begs another question. If players want to complete these activities and have the resources available to them, why don't they use them? Aside from general social anxiety or the desire to play with friends instead of strangers,
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Playing with your friends, like people who you know, is much better than just playing with random people on LFG. And it could be a vastly different experience. Like some of the most fun experiences I've had with Destiny, some of my best memories are playing raids or playing trials or playing Crucible, just hanging out with my friends. But if they were just random people who I met that day, I don't think I would have had the same experience. And I think it would have been considerably less fun. But I suppose the only way to get to those experiences is first to meet people and meet people who become your friends in the game. Like I think it's not very common for people who were friends originally outside of the game to come into the game and continue playing it together for a long time. I think most of the times when people have friends in Destiny, it's because they also met them in Destiny. So it's kind of like a barrier to entry. You kind of have to meet these people, become friends with them, and then you can have these amazing experiences with them eventually over time.
There are a few reasons why LFG doesn't work for a lot of people. I can sum the biggest one up in 4 simple letters. KWTD. Forcing someone to know what to do or get kicked is just not cool.
Okay, yeah, that can be pretty toxic, but also you can learn what to do pretty well from watching a guide or two. Like I feel like if I'm doing something for the first time, if I just go watch a simple guide on it before I go in, like I know basically what to do. I might not be a pro at it, but I at least understand how the mechanics work. And anyone can do this, you know?
I'm not here to shame anyone that does it frequently, but it is a very commonplace thing that is kind of toxic. I understand people put it there because they might have other things going on and don't want to take the time to teach someone. They want a smooth run. But everyone is a beginner at one point or another.
I mean, I think that is fair, right? People are allowed to have a run where they don't want to teach people, just like people are allowed to have a run that they do want to teach people. I do think that it is kind of an unrealistic expectation for every group to be open to people who have no idea what they're doing, because then it could just fill up with 5 people who don't know what they're doing and 1 person who does, and that's probably not going to work out very well.
Everyone has a first run, and everyone should have the opportunity to learn. There have been times where I joined an Atheon checkpoint, for example, and within like 5 minutes, I'm reminded why I never use LFG. I know a lot of this is random.
What does he actually mean by that, though? What reminds him of not wanting to use LFG? Like, what exactly is that experience like?
And not everybody's like this, but some Destiny players have an intimidating God complex issue. There's a difference between teaching and carrying. Teaching allows that new person to contribute so that in future runs they can improve and hopefully become a teacher one day.
Yes, I think this is an absolutely incredible point that he's making here. I actually have seen clips of certain Trials streamers who will remain unnamed who just roast their carries. Like, they're just extremely mean to the people who they are carrying into Trials. And on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, there's the people who are super nice and actually give them tips on how to improve and how to play better. And those things are so different. And I think it's important that he is pointing out this distinction between the carry and the teacher.
Having half the team sit there dead while you go shoot all the oracles by yourself doesn't help anybody. Wipes are okay, mistakes are going to happen. Unfortunately, it's more common for people to tear one another down, kick them from the group, or have them sit out than work through wipes and mistakes as a team.
This is actually something that annoys me so much. You wipe one time and then people just leave. It's the worst.
I will say this about Bungie's Find a Fireteam feature though. It does work incredibly well as a matchmaking service for Nightfall Strikes or Legendaries of Eternity or Presage or even Grasp of Avarice. There are tons of people casually running through these activities without a mic, so you can just hop in and do your thing like you would with any other match-made activity.
He's talking about the old system here, but this stands for the new system as well. I mean, with the Fireteam Finder in-game.
One of the biggest reasons why I'm making this video is because there is clearly a desire from solo players to get raid loot. There are tons of tutorials on how to glitch into raids to earn loot. People used to solo encounters like this because it was impressive. But it's now clear there are lots of people that do it because they prefer exploiting the game. Bungie has made changes to how hidden chests within raids and dungeons work because of this. And I'm not going to venture down the rabbit hole on whether or not that is ethically correct to glitch the game, but that really does say something. The raids are some of Destiny's best content, and people would rather cheapen that experience than take the plunge in an LFG group. Like I said earlier, I've been a part.
I'm not sure it's necessarily because they want to cheapen the experience. It just can be that coming up with a whole group and organizing it can be kind of a hassle. So if you can just load in 5 minutes and go get some loot, it can be a lot lower lift than committing to a 2-hour run of some raid. So
Part of dedicated raid groups before, so I understand they too might be deterred from allowing new players to join. And I'm hoping people can find some sort of middle ground here. Be honest, when you hear new, do you hear bad? Do you associate new players with being bad?
I mean, objectively, yes. I mean, if you've never played a game before, you're not going to be good at it. Everyone starts out being bad. So, I mean, if you have experience from other games and you're new to this game, you might still be okay. But yeah, pretty objectively, when you are brand new, you're not going to be the best player.
I'd be willing to bet a lot of people do, which, I mean, we all kind of do in a way, maybe, I don't know, but it just isn't true. Even Dado or Esoteric or whoever you think a good Destiny player is new at one point.
Yeah, of course. Like I just said, everyone is new at one point and they improve and get better over time. But saying that you are good when you're new is just not the case.
Say this. Destiny raids and dungeons are a whole other beast, compared to 90% of the game's other activities. You need to be of level, you need to have guns that do DPS. You cannot load up the game for the first time in half a year and try to beat Avarice with a blue hand cannon using Behemoth Titan. In college, people will joke around how you can always spot a freshman because they wear the orientation lanyard around their neck. This is the Destiny equivalent of being a noob. If you're new to a raid, be respectful to those willing to teach you. Do your research on what weapons are good this season, which exotics and subclasses to use. Do the grind, prepare, be of level.
Yeah, this is the single biggest thing that I think solo players can take away from this if they are looking to get into raids. Like, you can easily prepare and make the lives of the people who are playing with you and teaching you so much easier. If you just watch a guide, you learn a few things, come with some good gear, some half decent weapons that you get from outside of the raid, and then it's just so much easier for other people to bring you into the raid and teach you what to do.
If you enter into a raid group and tell them you haven't done it before, but you've got a threaded needle with Vorpal weapon and Celestial Nighthawk or something,
slightly outdated
any
meta.
Reasonable team will feel just fine about letting you play with them. Experienced players can be mean. Yes, they shouldn't be. But new...
Yeah, I think that is actually a pretty big issue. Experienced players in this game can be rather toxic. I'm not saying that everyone is, clearly that's not the case, but that is kind of an annoying thing that I've noticed, especially in like super high-end PvP. People are just kind of mean, which is super unfortunate.
Players should come ready to contribute. I don't feel like people say that, like ever. In my own search for fire teams, Rick Kakis recommended I join a certain Discord server. It's an active one, and there you're not allowed to put KWTD, and people are significantly more chill. If you're in a position where you're looking for groups but are kind of turned off to Bungie's Find a Fire Team, I think joining a community Discord that is more new player friendly with moderators and rules is a much better place for you to be.
Absolutely. Discord.gg/Shadow Destiny. We have all of those things, and we're happy to teach you if you want to learn.
Sometimes the model of Destiny kind of sucks. It's great when you play with friends, but it's also just as sucky when you're unable to. Finding 5 friends to play a game at the same time is hard enough. But finding friends that are just as into the game as you are and maintaining that for years is incredibly rare.
That's true. I think a lot of people, like you kind of mentioned earlier in the video, a lot of people fall off from the game, or they just become less into it and play less frequently over time. And that can kind of slowly dilute the friend group as certain people leave over time. So I think that's why it's important to continue just meeting new people every now and then, and keeping a group of people around you who are into the game like you are.
And raids aren't a one and done activity. It requires constant grinding if you want to get all the loot. I understand why new players get discouraged and why veteran players get deterred and closed off to helping new people out. Bungie can maybe do a little bit to improve the current experience, but a lot of it is just the harsh reality of playing with random strangers on the internet. Luckily, there is a lot of content to do solo, and there are better communities out there to join if that is something you would like to do. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by dropping me a like.
All right, well, it seems like that is basically it. Let me know down in the comments if you are a solo player, and if you are, why you are a solo player. Is this something you're doing by choice, or is this something that you want to change maybe in the future? If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and I'll catch you in the next one.